China government statements are always regarded with skepticism, maybe rightly, maybe not. But tell me what they have been saying about the COVID outbreak.
Well, the numbers that they've been reporting have been very low. Some might say quite unrealistically low. Since December 3rd, since after December 3rd, there have been 2 reported official fatalities. That's not a number that seems very realistic. Only about 20 if you go back a couple more weeks, weeks before that. And if you look at even for example, Kaishan, the state media organ, reported on Friday of last week that they had seen 2 media staffers die. So, the numbers just aren't jiving. Also, on Weibo, there's all sorts of attention being paid to things like, the queues at funeral parlors and that sort of thing. So there's definitely good reason to think that the numbers are considerably higher than it's being reported.
Well, I mean, let me push back a little bit on this and ask, A, does it really matter? I mean, in Singapore, no other countries these days are reporting deaths as headline events, and generally as a consequence of the fact that the Omicron virus is less damaging, is less fatal than the other virus. So the idea that there would be fewer deaths is actually not that unbelievable. And I was reading the Global Times yesterday, and some of the Chinese officials are being very candid about the problems ahead. I had one Chinese official predicting a million infections within the next couple of months, and saying this is like 10, 15 times more than the number of IC beds we've got. So, they're not actually shirking the idea that this is going to be a major issue.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said is valid, but it's precisely the not knowing how bad this is going to get over the winter. I think that markets, for example, seem at least in part to agree with you. The Hang Seng has increased since November almost 19%. Mainland markets have increased not as much as that, but quite a bit as well, which indicates that either markets aren't taking it as seriously as some folks in the mainland and some folks outside of China are taking it, or it indicates that they're just going ahead and looking forward to spring and hoping that there is a spring and we come through it and, there will be a terrific, horrible, I should say, human fallout, but they're already looking past that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the market reaction, as you say, compared to the media narrative has been very different. But then we have been talking for many, many weeks about, how everyone's sitting there poised in the markets waiting for a turnaround, because that means greater economic growth. So I guess the impact of the deaths and the realignments doesn't make much difference to the investors.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to try to find that bottom, and that appears to be exactly what markets are focusing on.
But interestingly, I guess it also means that Beijing has decided that the calculus here is that economic growth right now is its priority, and perhaps that they're not too concerned about the death toll. I mean, to what extent are we? To what extent do we know whether the variants that are alive in China right now are among the more dangerous ones?
We don't really know, and that's a great point, or a great question that you asked there, because that storyline, well, it's really not much more than a cold, which is actually being said now in Beijing, is a vast switch from what was just being said, a month ago, where it was about ridiculing countries that had this sort of live with COVID strategy, when they were still sort of, vaunting the zero COVID strategy. And also that, it's not much worse than a cold narrative is pretty similar to what Donald Trump used to say and Jair Bolsonaro used to say, and I do think that it's hard not to get around the conclusion that there has been a decision made that, look, we weren't going to be able to keep containing it anyway, so we might as well let the genie out of the bottle and let's ride it out, and then we'll, have a brighter day for the economy down the line.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump was saying that when Delta was around, which there was a big difference there. Interesting, similar situation we had in Singapore, wasn't it, where they kept reporting infections above everything else, and we were wondering, well, at the end of the day, if the infections are not leading to any serious major death numbers, then what's the point of counting infections? We should be thinking about the problem of the variant itself.
Singapore believed in giving us as many numbers as they possibly could. They believed in providing all the data, and that's another thing that I think some people find a little bit grating about China's if not reversal, then at least partial dismantling of zero COVID, because it was so abrupt, and they've now changed the way that they report what is a COVID death, to define a COVID death. It used to be that if you died while you had COVID, that was a COVID death. Now it's you have to specifically die of a respiratory illness while you have COVID. That's been a change that's just happened in the last week. And if you think about it, that's a diagnosis that's going to require an individual doctor to write down, yes, this was a respiratory death, when, knowing that there are potential political consequences to that.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been a problem for every country around the world, hasn't it? We had that conversation in the UK very vociferously a year ago. At the end of the day, China has managed to stave off a significant number of deaths compared to what we've seen in the West. We just have to wait and see whether this new variant will have them catch up on that front, which is not to be desired.
It's a different path, and we will see over the coming months how it unspools.
All right, Ted, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
What about other stories on CNBC.com before you go, Ted? What are you covering in the digital front?
Yeah, so, this story is obviously one that folks are following. But if you look at the top stories among international readers on CNBC.com right now, the Ukraine live blog is always popular, and there were some things that popped here over the last 24 hours. Of course, we had Vladimir Putin visiting Belarus, and we had Volodymyr Zelensky visiting Bakhmut, which is the front lines and actually quite a dangerous area. That's gotten a lot of attention. Elon Musk saying that he is, well, actually not saying, CNBC in the U.S., David Faber is reporting that Elon Musk is actively looking for a new CEO. He put out that poll, said he would adhere to it, and the poll said that he should no longer be CEO. That story, as you can imagine, is also getting a lot of attention. And then the move yesterday from the Bank of Japan, a real shocker. Japan sort of marching to its own beat there. Of course, there's nothing new there, but bond yields spiking higher everywhere based on the decision made by the Bank of Japan to give themselves a little more leeway on where they're going to put rates.
Yeah, Elon Musk's been quite quiet after that poll, hasn't he? I mean, there was the response was enormous. 17 million odd people.
One almost gets the impression that he expected it to go differently, but it's a straw poll. These things could be manipulated. I'm not saying that it isn't valid. I'm saying that we don't know.